So just so you know, for those of you that are either visiting or you've only been with us for a short time, Jesse and Megan and Sammy, what's up, Sammy? And Ever, they are our missionaries to Cambodia. They have been for the past 4 years. Well, these two little ones are just getting started. And so we're just so excited to be able to hear the ministry that they've been doing. We're going to start with a short video so that you can see some of the work that they're doing with a ministry called Daughters of Cambodia. And then Jesse's going to come back up and get started. All right? So let's start the video.
In the karaoke bar, I welcome the customer standing in a line with another girl. The customer looked me up and down from my toes to my head before deciding whether they would choose me. If a customer didn't choose me, he would say and do bad things to me, such as throwing the alcohol at my body. I saw many girls there being threatened with a gun or hit by the customer in order to force them to go to the guest house with the customer. I feel like I was the game for the customer to play. When he needed me, he took me to play, and when he didn't need me, he threw me away. I feel different to other people. I feel small. I was beautiful, it's true, but my value was small. Other people had education and a good life with value. I feel like was too hard because I had no value. At night, I used to sweat all over and experience great fear, and I could not breathe. I want to kill myself. Since I started to work at Daughter, this feeling has reversed. I know I have self-worth and people don't look down on me. I feel happy and valued. Before, I earn a lot of money, and at Daughter, I get less. But here, no one look down on me, and I feel peace in my heart. Nobody say bad thing to me. I would like to help other sex workers to stop that lifestyle and change their life. This is my plan. I want to be a counselor.
At Daughters, we desire to see an increase of young women and young men from the sex industry experiencing freedom by expanding to new areas of Cambodia and beyond to other countries in the region where sex trafficking is rife. We can only continue to do this through your support and assistance. We need people who will give of their time, skills and money, and people who will pray for us in the difficulties and stresses of our work with these precious human beings. So please continue to journey with us.
Hi guys. See where my mic is. I'm loud. Do I have to switch this on? Hello? Hi, guys. So that was a little bit about the organization I work with in Cambodia. We are focused on creating social enterprise in order to empower women to get out of the sex trade. It's really important for us that it's not an institutionalized system, that they are not in a program, so that we are able to allow them to make their own money, learn their own trades, pay for their own places to live, and empower them to lead themselves out of sex work. So I just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, so we've been in Cambodia for the last 4 years, together as a family. I've been back and forth to Southeast Asia for about 7, on and off. And the first time I went to Cambodia was actually with a group from Church Without Borders, where we were working with a couple different ministries, and one of which was very similar in what they do, called Agape International Mission. And it was there that I really felt like the Lord confirmed that that's where he wanted me, that's the kind of ministry he wanted me in, and that there wasn't really any other work for me worth doing while that kind of ministry was available. So anyway, a little about how we got to Cambodia, or our call, and what encouraged us to get involved in this kind of ministry. So I haven't been saved for very long. Well, I have, but I always refer to myself as a baby Christian, but apparently I've been a believer for 7 years, which is actually a really long time. So we were brought to Cambodia through the revelation that our freedom is a gift. Even though we had to fight for it at times, even though we had to work for it, it's not our doing, it's the Lord. Through our circumstances and through just people in our lives who've laid foundations for us, he brought us to know himself, and there's so much freedom in that. So before I knew Jesus, my oldest sister, who was up here leading worship, was stomping around her living room unknowingly one day, out loud, praying Isaiah 61 over me. And that just, that thought is wild to me. Like, that the God of the universe would care about the bondage that I was in. That if God wanted to proclaim liberty over me when I was captive, and if he wanted to heal my broken heart, how much more would he want to free captives that are in physical captivity, or heal hearts that are in the most heartbreaking circumstance the world is capable of fostering. So that's a little of our motivations. So that testimony is great, but Daughters does a lot more things than that. Daughters has helped around 800 girls to leave sex work, and that's not counting the men and the transgender people that they've brought out of sex work. We have an excellent social work team. We have medical care, which is huge in Cambodia. I've heard stories of people going to the government hospital and essentially being profiled and looked at as though they didn't have enough money, so the doctors never came to their room. They just let them die in there. And so it's a big deal for these people who come from these compromised circumstances and feel like they don't have any other options to have just really basic medical care. We also have child care, which is huge for my ministry. I'm the outreach coordinator, so I coordinate outreaches to red light districts and rough parts of town full of karaoke bars and massage parlors and hostess bars and all other things that are just fronts for brothels. And we go and we just offer ladies jobs. We don't shut down these places. We don't go in with a police force, but we think it's really important that there's a choice involved. A lot of people, like I said, believe the lie that there's no other option. And jobs are scarce in Cambodia. It's a very real problem. There are a lot of people who, it's pretty reasonable for them to think that that's their only option. So what we do is we offer these jobs. There's all kinds of things they do at Daughters. They do screen printing and making clothing. I'm wearing one of the shirts right now. My mom was downstairs selling them earlier. Shout out to her. But there's screen printing, there is garment making, there is bag making. They run a spa where they only tend to women for safety purposes, where they're able to repurpose their skills they used in bad areas in the sex industry. They can now do massage and spa work and salon work, but all within the safety of our organization, which is really cool. It's really redeeming. We used to have a cafe, which was shut down during COVID, but there's plans to get that started again. That created a lot of jobs. So our clients make a fair trade wage, which is really cool because a good job in Cambodia is about $200 a month salary, which is not enough to live in Phnom Penh right now, but we start them at a fair trade wage, which is already higher than that. I should have had the number on here. I believe it's around $230 a month. That might not be accurate, which doesn't sound like a lot more, but it is. There's also room to move up within daughters. There's multiple promotions they can get if they stay with us for a long period of time. And one of the coolest things is we've gotten to see beneficiaries of our program who we know and love graduate from our program and start cafes in different cities. Our production manager, one of my favorite people in the world, she is actually a former client. We call the survivors and daughters our clients because we serve them, not the other way around. And so, yeah, so that's just really cool. Our visitor center is run by another client of ours. So it's been super cool to see them move from that to staff. On my outreach team, sorry, I skipped something. I had a different plan, but I'm the outreach coordinator at Daughters. So that's what I do. We go out and do all those things like I said before. But my team is made up of a bunch of former clients, which is really a privilege. I think it's kind of funny that I'm the outreach coordinator, but in reality, I'm constantly asking the ladies on my team because they know the rough areas. They know where people need the help. And in reality, on the outreaches, I speak a little Khmer. I can handle a conversation, but I'll never be able to relate to the circumstances that these ladies go through in the same way that they can. So it's a huge privilege to be able to go out with people who have been there to help offer people these opportunities. Yeah, let's see. Sorry, I have notes and I'm not good at using notes. I usually just freestyle, but then I take too long. Yeah, we also practice very intentional intercession. As an organization, prayer is really, really big for us, especially for my ministry, I feel, but there's probably people in other ministries that are like, oh, it's very important for us too. But with the work that we do, going out to meet people where they're at in their own circumstances, I think it's really important for God to go ahead of us. If any of you have ever talked to a loved one who's not a believer and tried to tell them about Jesus, you'll understand how important it is that God goes ahead of you and prepares their hearts. And while our outreaches aren't purely evangelistic, like we are there to show the love of Jesus, to meet practical needs, and by doing so, give authority to our words to be able to share the gospel with them. There's no requirement that you come to Jesus to come work at Daughters. But you are going to be in an environment where you're surrounded by people who love Jesus and have been set free by him and are excited and passionate about it. And so we count that as evangelism. All right, I'm gonna go move on before I take too long. So yeah, I could talk about how passionate I am about this ministry for way too long. Do we have any slides? I probably should have been queuing up for slides the whole time. There were multiple slides from my fault. So, see where they're at. Yeah, so I'll just go through the slides real quick and explain some of the pictures. That's my family before the littlest one. The other picture, I wasn't going to explain it, that's not on my script, but that is Street 136, which is like the most infamous red light district in Cambodia. And the rainbow over it is huge because we were working with our friends at an organization called Iris, and this was the first time they opened their prayer room. And we went there to go pray over Street 136. For the first time, God had a place of worship and prayer over this awful, heinous place where people from all over the world come for sex tourism. And it was just so cool to see the promise of the Lord over the top of it. So that's pretty rad. But could you hit me with another one? So that's my outreach team. The blonde lady there is Ruth. Don't laugh at me, Jen. And she's our boss and our founder. She came to Cambodia in 2007. She was a psychologist, and she was there to help people through counseling and through therapy. When I went for the first time in 2017 with John, there was 25 therapists in the entire country. And Ruth was one of them. But it's a huge need over there. There was a genocide in Cambodia between 74 and 79, and there is so much generational complex PTSD. It's unreal. So she came there for that reason, and then she realized the prevalent problem with sex work, and she wanted to get freedom for these ladies, but she also realized they needed jobs, like the number one thing you're met with. Even when we go and offer them jobs, they're like, well, like, is it enough? I have children. And so that's a picture of us on outreach. And I was going to pull that up when I was referencing Isaiah 61. So there's Isaiah 61. You're welcome. You can read it real quick if you want. So there's some pictures of outreach. There's some more pictures of outreach. That's on 136. That's on that road. It's a little bit higher end, if you could call it that. There's just more money there. That's why that street's so prevalent, especially for foreign tourism. All right. Cool. So, after I started with daughters, one of the other responsibilities I was given was a small group that full of girls who are both believers and not believers. They are from all different walks of life, and I was given kind of the bad eggs, you could say. They told me, Ruth told me that it was character building, to which I felt extremely uncomfortable because I don't think of myself as a man of exceptional character. But I did about 2 weeks of teaching on honesty and work ethic, and then felt sick to my stomach. So I went to Ruth and I told her about how ridiculously uncomfortable that made me. And I love her. Our friend Phil Cunningham, last time he was there with a team, said some people get excited about meeting Bono. I get excited about going to see Ruth. And I feel that a lot of the time. But she said, you'll figure it out. So I went home and I prayed a lot, and I felt like it was really important for me to figure out how do you build character in people, which is it's a moot point. You can't build character in other people. It doesn't matter how good you think you are of a life coach or whatever. The things that build your character are fruits of the Spirit. And so with a group of 15 girls, half of which are believers and half of them aren't, I didn't know what to do except turn it into kind of a prayer group. I just wanted to give the Lord an opportunity to show himself to these ladies. So we did that, and God just performed a ton of miracles, and this is a start of one of them. Sorry for that segue. So one of our students, Sreti, was already a believer. She loved the Lord so well, so incredibly, super passionate, crying all the time and then laughing and apologizing for crying. That's kind of her deal. So she had been married for quite a few years and couldn't have a baby. And so she was living with her mother-in-law and her husband's family. But she was kind of a second-class citizen in the house. They knew about her past, and she wasn't even allowed to eat at the dinner table. And they told her that the reason she couldn't get pregnant was because she was cursed from her past. And so Sreti got pregnant, and there was much rejoicing, and she started to be accepted by her family. But her babies came way too early. She had twins, but they were born super, super premature. And I probably should have split this into a before and after, but the doctors said there was no hope, there was no chance they were going to survive. They had blood on the brain, and they were extremely underweight. And so in kind of, I don't know if you call this faith, because I'm not sure how much I believed, but I felt that it was important that we leaned into it and we believed for her and we prayed for these babies, and we just declared that God was going to show up and do what he does. And he did. He didn't make a liar out of me. But yeah, we just believed for it. Even though I had my doubts pretty often, it was pretty dire. It sounded pretty bad. But these are Josiah and Jeremiah, which is huge because Cambodians have Cambodian names. Like, there's not many of them. You'll meet 100 Sopaks, Sopiops, Srei, somethings. There's so many people in Cambodia that all have the same name. But that's Jeremiah and Josiah, which I just think is incredible. And they're going to grow up there, believers. They're super healthy. I should have added another picture where I'm holding Jeremiah. It's a good one. All right, so give me another slide. So that's my small group. I had to blur people's eyes out. Looks kind of creepy because I didn't have the app I usually use. But they're all lovely ladies. That's my birthday. So actually, could we go one more? I have these out of order. That's my bad. So this is Narong. One of the reasons I started with Daughters of Cambodia was we were leaving our old ministry at YWAM, and we both had this constant feeling of where would Jesus be? And so while John was there the last time with some leaders from Steps of Justice, we went to go meet with Ruth, and I thought I was just there to hang out with Phil and John, but Ruth started telling the story of Narong. Narong had a stroke while he was in quarantine, and someone found him by seeing him through his window unconscious, and he was a transgender sex worker. He was on fire for Jesus. After he got saved, he continued to dress like a lady, but he was out in those places just preaching the gospel to everybody. And so I don't know, I can kind of relate, like somebody who doesn't really fit in and maybe gets laughed at, but is saved and is preaching the gospel and is excited about it. So that resonated with me, and the other thing was just the care he needed. After he woke up from his coma, that's another miracle that I don't have time to explain, but the people from Daughters went out after he was in a coma, and the hospital sent him home to die because there's a superstition that he would haunt the hospital, so they didn't want him to die there. So they sent him home to the village to die, and Ruth was mad because she wanted to go pray for him. And so, you still have that. I thought that was happening before. That's why I was explaining it anyway. Yeah, can we throw that up?
Yeah, so Jessie really helps us. Sadly during COVID, we had a client who had a stroke, and he was in the hospital and the doctor said there was no hope, and his family took him home to the province to die. But we continued to go as the daughter's social work team to take supplies and pray for him, and we looked and prayed for a rehabilitation place and found one in Phnom Penh. And Jessie was really keen in doing the visits to him and then helping bring him back to Phnom Penh where he gets physiotherapy and occupational therapy. When he went there, he was just lying flat on his back, he couldn't walk or move, and within 2 weeks he could sit up, within a month he could walk, and we're really seeing sort of miraculous things happen. And Jessie's prayer and encouragement has been a huge part of this success story.
Yeah. Jessie, Megan, we miss you. We waiting for you come back.
Come back soon.
Yeah.
Sammy's gonna be so mad. He missed his favorite person on earth on that video. He loves Bang Pali. But yeah, so there's the story. So Yeah, how miraculous is that? I mean, he went from, he couldn't even sit up without being sick. His muscles were all atrophied. They kind of taught, we had a physical therapist teach me how to just move his limbs for him. And so, could we go one more slide from the last one? Awesome, thank you. So, on Good Friday, I had a very emotional day. That's Narong there, praying over these babies who are being dedicated to the Lord. Narong hadn't been back to daughters for almost 2 years. He was sleeping on a wooden sleeping table under his house for most of that time until we got him to the rehabilitation center. And so, yeah, it was just really emotional to see him get the motivation to live. He often was telling us that we should just let him die. He was struggling. He lost his mother at the same time. It was a really, really rough time. But he walked up the stairs mostly by himself, needed a little help, and was on crutches. But, I mean, huge miracle. And there's those 2 babies. So in that, I really felt like God was showing me that all this time, we had done all this time and had nothing to show for it, and then it all came to a head on one day. And I really feel like that was God showing me, kind of like what we were singing today in that song. It's like, even when you don't see it, he's working. Even when you don't feel it, he's working. God really used this to encourage me that, yeah, you can go out and nobody can be interested in leaving their job. Or if they're interested, they're afraid to, whether they're intimidated. But you can work and work and work and plant seeds and bear no fruit, and plant seeds and bear no fruit. And God can be setting this up. Like, it doesn't, even if I didn't see it, he was setting that up, right? Like, even if I wasn't there anymore, even if it happened 10 years down the road. So that's a really long way to share about all we were doing just to get to that point. But that's really what I wanted to share as an encouragement to you. If you feel like you're banging your head against a wall, maybe you're making more progress than you think. Or maybe the Lord's doing it around you and you have very little to do with it, which is how I feel most of the time. So, we also want to talk a little bit about the challenges and the difficulties just of doing our job. I have historically had no problem going back to Cambodia and had a harder time coming here. But I think this time is the first time it's probably going to be harder to go there. Just seeing the way that my son has been thriving here and enjoying his family and loving his grandparents and being outside. It's tough in a city like Phnom Penh. There's no safe sidewalks. There's nowhere to put him. He doesn't go outside. He lives in our shoebox apartment. And there's just so much compromise involved. And that's not to say that I don't understand the blessing of where God has us. I love Cambodia. I think I annoy my friends because they'll have a conversation that has nothing to do with Cambodia, and I'll be like, well, in Cambodia, we do it like this. So it's pretty obnoxious. I'm obnoxious. But yeah, we're going to have a real hard time, so pray for Sammy. It's hard to make sacrifices for the Lord on behalf of your children when it feels like they don't get a say. And I think this might be a pretty hard transition. But we know we're there for a reason. We know what God's doing. We know how important the work is. One of the biggest difficulties is financial need. That's where that slide comes in. Recently, actually just a couple weeks ago, they declared Phnom Penh the second most expensive city in Southeast Asia, which doesn't even count because number 1 is Singapore, which is the second most expensive city on planet Earth. So really, of Southeast Asian cities, it just became the most expensive, which is absurd if you've been around Southeast Asia. Like, there are some wealthy cities. The fact that Phnom Penh is more expensive than Bangkok with what's available there comparatively is kind of crazy. So finances have been tough. We were funded for Battambang, which was out in the province, out in the fields in the middle of nowhere, where you could rent a 2-story house for $250. But the work in the ministry we're called to is in the city. It's in the capital. It's where everybody wants to be, except for us. And so it's expensive. So it's actually hard to even budget right now because it's increasing so rapidly. It's like month to month. But we also don't know where we're moving when we get home. We have 2 weeks in the place we were before we left. There was some drama and complications with the place we were living. They agreed to store our stuff, but we don't really have a home there anymore. So we're gonna go back with 2 under 2, and we're gonna be jet lagged, and we're gonna be looking for houses for 2 weeks to get in by the next month when we get there. So that's very stressful. Our goal before knowing about this when we came home was to raise $1,000 a month of additional support while we were in the States. We have $160 committed. I don't have my calculator. Whatever 1,000 minus 160 is, that's where we're at. So yeah, please consider it. The first time I got up on this stage, I was so nervous to ask for money. I was raised by a single mom who worked doubles all the time and raised 4 kids on bartending wages. It's not in my nature to ask people for handouts. That's really difficult for me to ask people for their hard-earned money. But the first time I got up on this stage, I was so nervous to ask, I left the stage without asking. Thank God for John being like, so also he needs money because he's going to the other side of the world. But now I don't feel that way. Like, it's so cool to see the fruit of 7 years of what God told me I was going to be doing that I only started a year ago. Like, there's a confidence in that. Like, I know we're where God wants us. I know we're starting to see the fruit. We've been planting these seeds. Even if we weren't seeing the fruit, I also know God wants us to be confident in the call that he's put on us. So if you would like to help support us, what we really need is monthly support, but also we're going to need something to cover a down payment on an apartment. We also need a car. We can't put our 2 kids in rickshaw tuk-tuks for much longer. As soon as the baby is no longer chest carryable, it will not be safe for Megan to have 2 kids in these open tuk-tuks. It's probably already not super safe now. All right, so I'm gonna close. I'm sure I'm over time. I just want to tell one more quick story. Could I have the last slide? So this is William Carey. He's often called the father of modern missions. He was one of the first people in the UK to preach that, wait, if the Great Commission's promise is until the end of the age, isn't it absurd that the call should not be of equal extent, that we should not be called to do the same thing. And so it's kind of an inspiration to me, but he went to India. He believed that it also wasn't purely evangelistic, but that meeting practical needs was important, which is something that I really value. Fun fact, he helped put a stop to, in India, it was customary that wives would burn themselves on the funeral pyre of their husbands. And he was like, that's completely absurd and awful. And he was a huge factor in that ending, which is super cool. But William Carey famously told his friend, who was also a preacher, this after they found out that they couldn't both afford to go to India. And his friend, Andrew Fuller, said that he was going to go around and preach about missions and the value of them and ask for money from churches to support him and also financially support him himself. And William Carey told Fuller right as he was leaving that I will go down to the pit if you will hold the rope. So what we're asking when we're asking for not only financial support, for prayers, for being a part of our team, is that you'll hold the rope, that it's not always easy. I know sometimes we make it look like a ton of fun. It's not a vacation all the time. I absolutely love Cambodia, and I'm privileged to be there and work there and do the job I do. But it's hard, and we need help, and you are still our church. So we love you guys, and thank you, and I'm honored that you guys sat and listened. But